as a former hiring manager, I want to look at somebody's resume and say, okay, they solved a same or similar business problem as to what I have. And this is somebody I want to talk to.
All right. Welcome. We will give everyone a few minutes to join. But we always like to start off with a little icebreaker question. And I think this one today comes from Serge. And we want to have our guests today, Tom and Jennifer. And it's funny because they're in the recruiting business. How does a recruiter get recruited?
I guess it's very similar to any role from my experience. So I was called by a recruiter asking if I'd considered working in recruitment. I had to a certain extent, and yeah, it all went from there. So they took the initiative, I suppose, had my CV from a job board, and then brought me in for interview. So it's very boring and very similar to almost every interview process. So yeah, nothing exciting there, but I'm not sure if it was any different for you, Jennifer.
Yeah, I mean, recruiting and sales are very, very similar. So we're also looking at students coming out of university with like marketing or a sales background or being part of a sales club as well, because they have some experience in that. And that's generally how our teams are being built now.
And then I thought it would be, again, knowing nothing about the recruiting space, I thought it was more oriented to people who had some kind of background in the field that they're recruiting for. Is that not the case? Do you kind of train up once you start working with a certain sector?
In my experience and how my team operates, and maybe I should just back up and tell you, I lead our data analytics and enterprise applications team across North America. So when someone joins our team, they are put into a very specialized lane where then they begin to acquire knowledge, and they're responsible for their own education and upskilling, so that they're becoming an expert in that space. And whether that's data engineering or data science or natural language processing, AI, whatever that might be, that's where they begin to build their skills. So generally, they come in without that background, and then there are specialized learning paths for them to become knowledgeable in that space, what our customers are looking for, the hot skills that are out there, other training that are available, and then just continuing to become specialized in their role.
Yeah, similar from my perspective as well. Obviously, myself and Jennifer work for the same company, so it is the same in the UK as to the US. So I'm not at the same level as Jennifer, but I'm still involved in some of the hiring processes on my side, and it is hiring organically to a certain extent. We do look for people with sales experience and a sales background, ideally, but it's more about the personality type and the company fit, the cultural fit, and so on. And then when they come in, they are often asked their passions, which area of IT they might want to work in, and then they would have the relevant training and kind of learn on the job as well from working within particular markets, whether that's data or analytics or infrastructure or security. So yeah, it's more of a training within the role, I would say.
So how did you both get into the world of data? That's something I'm wondering, because there's so many different niches, right? Yeah. And data is obviously super hot for the past few decades.
And is there a competition between recruiters for the hot sector? It's got to be data, but just let me know if there's competition.
The quick answer is, of course, there's always a competition for what people feel is the hottest, and that's where it's our internal marketing and team branding, which makes it very competitive to be a part of. How did I end up here? In a nutshell, in 1994, my very first job, I was responsible for COBOL programming. So did not start off in the world of data analytics and insights. I'll just skip along and say that along the way, I took it upon myself to be responsible for my own transformation as I saw things changing in the marketplace, and transform from, COBOL to working with SAP and a variety of other things to ultimately, taking what we used to see as creating a data warehouse, which is now, we have cloud data warehouses, and we're putting all sorts of analytics, AI, machine learning against the data that we are collecting to help us make better decisions, be predictive and prescriptive. part of that I took on me to learn that. You just don't fall into this space. But I'd say for some of the students coming out of university, or even early on in their careers, there's so much more opportunity to just interact with and be involved with those technologies kind of on the fringe, because it's part of nearly everything that we do. So, I mean, if you've been in IT for as long as I have, you naturally kind of have to come along and be curious as to how things are evolving and changing.
It's funny that you mentioned COBOL. My father is still a COBOL programmer. When we emigrated to the States, he just retrained from engineer to COBOL programmer, and 20, 30 years now, he's never had to reinvent himself. And in a way, I'm kind of jealous that every week it's like some new technology, some new feature that I'm having to brush up on. And he's got, his job is safe. Every year they beg him not to retire. So it's an envious position to be in, but that's why we're here today, in a way, to figure out exactly what is coming up, what are the hot new trends, what's hype, what is an actual asset to your long-term career planning, how to advance, how to move laterally or across companies. So I think with that, a round of introductions are in order, even though we've already got a little bit of background as to who our guests are. So let's take it with Tom and Jennifer. If you can give a little bit of an intro as to who you are, what you do, and what you specialize in.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So yeah, I'm Tom Bauer. I've been working with Tech Systems for 10 years now, entirely in the UK market. So, and also entirely within the data space. So I was lucky enough or fortunate enough to be, I guess, sat in the data team, which wasn't as busy as it perhaps is now back then, but I've seen the data market obviously grow and grow and grow, which we'll talk about more later on. But I'm, I guess, working as a principal consultant, but I joined as a junior resourcer, and I was straight away set to work finding it was predominantly the best SQL DBAs in the market, Oracle DBAs. It was quite DBA focused, and again that changed as well, obviously, throughout the years. I now lead our data analytics and insight desk, which covers contract and permanent positions. So we, I guess, specialize in the placement of anything from, data graduates, junior roles, through to data analysts, data architects, data modelers, data focused PAs, PMs, everything around that and in between, placing into a variety of industries, predominantly e-commerce, retail, large tech, those kind of areas. And I'm aligned to the London office, but as a result of the pandemic, I'm now based down in Devon, which is the southwest of England. So if anyone doesn't know UK geography, it definitely isn't commutable on a daily basis. So I'm pretty much in the middle of nowhere. So it's actually amazing we get Wi-Fi. But yeah, my knowledge of the data market has always been aligned to London. And I think since COVID, the UK has become smaller. So I think I've got a good idea of the UK market as a whole, and on this side of the pond. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, Jennifer Kling. I've been with Tech Systems for 14 years, but as I told you earlier, started my IT career in 94. Had a variety of jobs along the way, but really when I started with Tech Systems, that was my first time not being truly in IT, but more building a sales team and building a recruitment team that focused in enterprise applications and data analytics and insights. Short story, answer your question.
Sure. I'll give a bit of background for myself, especially since it's relevant to background and reskilling. I graduated as a programmer, background in Java. Never used Java a day in my life as in my work career. I just kind of went straight into data and hung around the SAP ecosystem for a little over a decade, and then switched to Snowflake, discovered the amazing world of cloud architecture, and never looked back. And that eventually led me to discover, or SQL DBM to discover me through some of the writing I was doing around Snowflake and its use cases. And I've since, again, kind of re-skilled as a product success lead, which is kind of between product evangelism and product management, product ownership sort of role. And I get to host these awesome webinars with very exciting guests. And I owe you both a huge apology. So for those that are on the call, This webinar was actually scheduled about 2 months ago, when before ChatGPT really came into its own. So back when like data jobs were managed by people, back when there were still jobs for us. So I'm pretty sure there's no more jobs available, and we're really sorry that you came all this way. Or wait, Tom's laughing. Is that not the case? Are there still jobs, Tom?
Yeah, for now. Yeah, maybe give it a couple of years, Serge. But for now, there's still that human element. But we'll see.
Oh, okay, never mind. Webinar is back on. In that case, let's start with our first question that we initially intended, which is, what does the job market actually look like right now? And it's funny how quickly it is changing just in these last few months.
I can start and just share. Obviously we hear all the stories about layoffs happening and companies restructuring, but the reality is that unemployment is still near in the US and in Canada. So I'll just speak for kind of North America, is really still towards an all-time low. We generally find those that are unemployed are transitional in between different assignments. The number, I think it was at the end of June, it was like 2.9%, which is well below the standard unemployment rate for non-IT based skill sets. So despite what you're hearing, there are still a lot of jobs out there. In fact, moving away from just the unemployment rates, overall, the demand for IT skills and experience far exceeds the supply of resources. So there are more jobs available than there are qualified resources for them across a variety of different skill sets. So I see the job market is very positive. We just really need to know where to look, and the combination and articulating. This is the critical thing. If you're looking for a job, being able to articulate what specifically you've done, not just the tools and the technologies you use, but what was the outcome, the positive business impact of the work that you did.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'd
any
echo
different
that.
in the UK scene?
No, I'd echo that as well. To be honest, to the US market. So yeah, there's no doubt that there are some negative elements. It's a difficult market at the moment for job hunting, and the impact of the large tech companies letting people go has had an impact on both the hiring market and the candidate market. So I guess from a hiring perspective, there's an unprecedented amount of top talent looking for work at the moment, and there's going to be a lot of applicants for every role, but there are still roles out there. And I guess on a positive note, the data side of things does seem to be the predominant area that we're seeing hiring. We cover the whole breadth of IT, and alongside maybe cybersec, I'd say data is the busiest area. So we're seeing more data opportunities than the likes of traditional infrastructure, DevOps, project management, business analysis, and even app dev, which is probably a first for us. So I think that because of the media focus on AI and so on, data is a very much mainstream topic, and that has narrowed the general focus on data, and companies won't want to be left behind. And I think all of that adds up to a busy data market comparatively. But as Jennifer said, it is a tough one out there as well.
So that's really comforting. And given that we'll be focusing specifically on the data space, so data analytics, data engineering, data architecture, can we start by just defining what the roles are within the data space? So you hear about data engineer, you hear about ML, data science, data architect, or just generic data analyst. Can you, from a recruiter perspective, kind of delineate what those roles are, how much overlap there is between them, how stringent the requirements are when companies are looking for a specific role, or do they just put a label on something and give a specific or generic set of expectations for each one?
I'll go, and then maybe Tom can add some commentary. I tend to see these data roles as like steps in people's career progression. So they start off as a data analyst, or they might start off as a data engineer, or maybe even a Java developer. There are different steps that you're going to take along your career to continue to advance yourself. So it's really important to make sure that you understand, or you're clear as to the path that you're really wanting to take, because you could move from a data analyst to an engineer to a cloud architect. And it is just the culmination of learning new skills, Serge, like you mentioned before, kind of like reinventing yourself, moving from Java to SAP to, to learning about Snowflake. It's important to just kind of understand those, because the most job openings or the most positions available are generally at that kind of entry level. And then as people build the skill and the experience, that's when they're able to move to higher level roles, and really begin to advance to some of the things that we're seeing now with like the top cloud providers and working in that space and architecting solutions, because they understand not just the industry, but how the tools and technology works, but also how business problems can truly be solved using that technology.
Okay. And as it stands today, if maybe Tom can take a stab at this, if we can boil it down to maybe 3 or 4 roles, what would they be? And what would be the kind of top of the tech skill stack for each one that you'd be expected to be pretty proficient in to be considered for that type of role?
Yeah, I guess if we're talking about traditional skill sets, then data engineer for us in the UK, data engineer would probably be the most commonplace. Within data engineer, it's going to be one of the 3 main cloud providers, one of the main cloud tech platforms, so AWS, Azure, or GCP is usually required as a level of expertise required from those. And outside of that, skills with SQL and or Python, typically SQL. SQL is still very much at the core of most of the roles we see. So that just hasn't changed over the past 10 years I've been working with the company. So I would say SQL kind of applies to all of these to a certain extent. Outside of that, it's funny because data scientist roles that are called actual data scientists seem to have reduced, but that's not because data science isn't something that's common. Obviously, as we're talking about AI and everything along those lines, is at the very forefront of everyone's mind. So I think it's more that data science has been broken down further into data analytics, machine learning, AI development, and then further into NLP, deep learning algorithms, and so on. So data science, data analytics is very common. I think analytics is the biggest area of growth over the last year. But that can be broken down further. So data engineering, data analytics as an overarching term, if you like. Outside of that, seeing a bit of a comeback for data architecture as well. But I would say probably data analyst, because it's maybe a slightly lower level role. So we're bound to see more of those skill sets required. So yeah, data engineers, analytics, data science type roles, and data analysts, I would say.
Okay. And Jennifer, do you want to answer that because Tom's just kind of covered the expected requirements?
Yep.
Can you go through what might be kind of some of the common nice to haves that, even though maybe they're not part of an engineer's background or expected stack, like let's say data visualization, but they're easy enough that someone can pick up a Tableau dashboard and slap something together. So what are some of the auxiliary skills that almost any role should be expected to, or would be a huge plus to have in their bag?
Okay, so these are things that I think most of us do. Most of the people probably on this webinar probably are familiar with, which is the ability to solicit and document a requirement from a business person and truly understand like what's the business value that's going to provide. That skill there, although we don't typically talk about it like a skill, it's not like Python or Java. That is incredibly important because that's what everything that we're doing is all about. The ability to speak with a business person and understand what their requirement is, not just take an order for like, I want something that looks like this, and this, but like, what's your problem? And then going back and figuring out a technical way to solve that problem. And that might be through a dashboard or might be through some other piece of technology. But that skill there, while it's really kind of hard to put your finger on what it is, again, your ability to articulate that on your resume and in an interview is the difference between getting an interview and not getting an interview, or getting a job and not getting a job. To be able to speak about, this is how it presented itself. And it might be, I don't have visibility into the number of orders in my supply chain over X time period, or it seems like we get really busy in July. Like, I don't really understand why. And then how did you solve that? what was the process that you walked through? And that might require working with some of the hottest, roles that are in demand now. We talked about data engineers, but there's also the data analysts and the data scientists and the architects, and then the master data folks. And then how did you work with all of those people? Your specific role, not so much like I was part of a team that did this, but I was responsible for this.
I'm so glad we have the experts here, because what you're saying resonates really deeply. But I've never thought about trying to communicate that particular skill set on my CV. And I've never been really quizzed or grilled about, on an interview even, how would you test for that? Either you or Tom, if you can answer. How do you ask a candidate whether you see it on their CV or don't see it? How do you determine if they have any expertise there?
So, I mean, if you think about, like, when people are applying for jobs, most systems that are processing the resumes are looking for certain keywords on the resume to match to what the hiring manager has said the job is about. So it might be data engineer, Python, Java. So you have to think about, okay, what do I need on my resume to get past that initial screening? But then what do I need to really stand out? And that's something quantifiable. Typically, when you start a job, you have a job description around you're going to accomplish these things. So taking that as a starting point, and then just continuing to keep track of, okay, develop X number of reports or dashboards, which enabled what? Visibility into supply chain, reduction in errors, increased revenue, reduced costs, whatever that might be. And then just articulating that. I typically say throw out the window the idea that your resume needs to be 1 to 2 pages. You can get past that initial keyword screening, then you need to be able to stand out by showing what you truly accomplished. Because as a former hiring manager, I want to look at somebody's resume and say, okay, they solved a same or similar business problem as to what I have. And this is somebody I want to talk to.
Yeah, I think something that we use quite often is not just for resumes and CVs, but also for interview advice, is the STAR approach, which is situation, task, action, and result. So clearly stating, because of X, because of this problem, I did Y. This was my action, and that resulted in Z and Z, which was obviously the result. So just making sure that you talk your whole way through the situation, task, action, and result, rather than saying, I helped the company save money by doing this. You could say, through automating this process, I reduced the time from 2 days to 2 minutes, and that saved the company a certain amount of money. And then you're just putting in facts, figures, and making your achievements more tangible and more believable to a certain extent as well. So yeah, I'd agree with what Jennifer said in that sense as well.
That's amazing. That's really important key for people to take away there. This is something that I've seen, especially junior level roles, put on their curriculum, because they're still finding their feet, their confidence. They just want to show off the technologies. And what you're saying sounds completely plausible, that someone who can articulate of how they helped the business and what problem they solved, even if it didn't deal with fancy things, maybe they used Excel to do it in PowerPoint, but prove that really they understood a problem and they found a solution. Sounds like it counts for a lot more than just buzzwords, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I was going to type in there, but I hit enter and it posted. Just keep in mind the 4 main things that every customer is trying to solve for: reducing costs, increasing revenue, mitigating risk, and improving experience. Everything from an IT perspective that we're doing is centered around one of those things. So pick the item that what you worked at solving. And if it's theoretical, let's say it's you're coming right out of university, right out of college, and you've just worked on group projects or individual projects. Okay, articulate what that problem was as it was stated to you and what it solved for, because you solved for it, even though it was in an academic environment. So for sure, you can do that.
Okay. So with that, our next point was going to be about some of the things that we're hearing about. So the hot technologies right now. And the question is really, what are they as of today? So we hear a lot about Snowflake and the rivalry with Databricks. Microsoft just released Fabric. So this literally wasn't even on the agenda when we put this meeting together. And now it's a hot new item. And how does that compare to some of the traditional workhorses like Oracle, like SAP, like Postgres and SQL Server that aren't going away? DB2. There's obviously market cap, and then there's market share, and they're not always going hand in hand. So what are you seeing in terms of what are the people are aware of kind of what's popping up on LinkedIn and articles and trends, but what are recruiters actively seeking right now? Which technologies, and how much of that is, what's the balance like between traditional and new age?
Yeah, I think it's quite clear that the cloud data platforms are dominating the data landscape at the moment. So obviously the likes of AWS and Azure and GCP in that order, we're seeing quite commonly. I think Google's GCP is stepping up a bit because of heavy investment by Google. But it's still heavy on the AWS and Azure side. And then like you mentioned, Serge, the likes of Snowflake and other cloud-based, not just data warehouse platforms, but also analytics platforms are the most common newer technologies we're seeing. So Snowflake, clearly hugely popular, and also the likes of GBQ, Synapse, Redshift coming back. So yeah, it does seem to be heavy on the Snowflake side, but cloud-based data warehouse and analytics platforms are definitely the biggest areas of growth for us in the UK anyway.
I'd say similarly in the US. So whatever your background is right now, if you're a SQL programmer, Java, Python, COBOL, or if you're supporting, I saw a couple of questions come through in the chat, if you're supporting or working with SAP or Oracle, or even homegrown applications that are running on some of those on-prem databases, there are some common themes, and Tom mentioned them, but most companies are looking to move some or all of those applications to a cloud provider. So that could be AWS, Azure, Snowflake, GCP, just to name a few. And that would my recommendation would be is if you're looking to not get pigeonholed into, okay, I just do this with this legacy technology. What is the bridge that companies are looking for? And it could be migrating data from an on-prem homegrown system that runs on Oracle to maybe it's Oracle Fusion in the cloud, maybe it's to AWS, and learning how that's done. And there are a variety of free classes you can take online to help you kind of get the background. And then how do you leverage it? It shows you how you can leverage the skills that you have. Like when I was going through some GCP training, like you can hammer out some SQL code there and then watch as the data is moved. So how do you bridge the current skills that you have to where we know our customers are going, or where we know, the world is going to things in the cloud, and pick a provider that makes that bridge easy, but then also really aligns with the typical industry that you're supporting. So some industries like financial services tend to rely more heavily on one cloud provider, while retail customers rely more heavily on another. And I'm not going to say the names of the providers because I think we all know, but the one you see most often in your day-to-day work would be the one that I would say that's going to be the easiest step to make, because you have the industry experience and you have the technology foundation. And now it's just, okay, what are those bridge skills or experience that I need to get to that next level?
Okay. One common theme that I would traditionally associate with on-premise systems is the degree of maintenance and fiddling and fine-tuning that used to be required, whereas the value proposition on cloud is really maintenance-free or self-hosted, self-managed. How does that translate into transitions between these systems of someone who used to specialize in knowing all the little knobs that they knew how to turn for performance enhancements on an on-premise system versus working in cloud architecture? Are those skill set more translatable, let's say, for an engineer? Will a company say we're looking specifically for a Snowflake focused engineer or a GBQ certified engineer? Or if you can say I have cloud experience, is that enough for some roles?
I think on our side, more so we're seeing specialist people needed. It's very rare that it'll be, we have this requirement and we're kind of cloud agnostic, if you like. So we'll see data engineers where Snowflake is essential. We'll see Redshift as essential. Sometimes I guess you might be able to get away with a bit of knowledge that can be transferred, but we do a lot of work with contract and ad hoc requirements, and for that you'd need to hit the ground running for a permanent position. Maybe it might be easier to transition between the different cloud technologies, but realistically, I think some level of experience is usually needed at that level.
Okay, you're saying with the specific cloud technology.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, when I see a job description that says, oh, it could be experience with any of the clouds, that, sure, that's what they really might mean, but who are they actually going to hire? And that's someone that has the experience with the technologies that are in that particular environment. So don't try to be, jack of all, master of, like all the different technologies. Focus on one, build your skills out from there.
Okay.
Yeah, on top of that, I would say it's important to kind of go after what you're passionate about. So it's very important to do the research and see which ones are popular. If there's, say, 4 or 5 different tools or cloud platforms that you are interested in, just work with them, be a user for a while and see which one you enjoy using the most so you can become more passionate. Because if you're more passionate about something than a different tool, then you're much more likely to enjoy learning and developing and growing with it as well. So I think it's important to have that passion for the tool that you are going after, rather than just thinking, oh, that's the most popular, even though I'm finding it a bit tricky to use. It's important to actually have that interest as well.
Okay. And a question about something that's very near and dear to our hearts, which is data modeling. So it's something that's been a part of database and engineering since databases were invented, but it took a little bit of a dip in the big data era. But now it seems like, the common refrain was that modeling is dead, schema on read, we don't need it. But now these things are coming back into vogue. And are you seeing in requirements specifically people looking for some capacity of understanding of key principles of data modeling, experience with data modeling tools, or just the principles of design and communication, not just hands-on, let's crank through and spit out some code?
I think you're spot on with that. We did see kind of a dip in that requirement over a time period. And that was mainly, I think, when customers were like, oh, wow, we need to just start collecting all sorts of data. And they had the mindset of, I can build this data strategy later, but first I need to get my arms around a whole bunch of data and then figure it out. The problem that created is they had so much data and so much noise out there, it was difficult to tell what was really important and what was going to help them make the right decisions. Now, bring back in a data modeler that can help try to figure out what is the data that's necessary, not just for an individual piece of the business, but for maybe an entire enterprise. How can that information be shared? What do different data models look like? They're going to still feed from the source system to help different groups from a self-service standpoint solve their own problems. So yeah, we kind of saw it go away a little bit as companies were hoarding data and just collecting it from all sorts of stuff and places. And now we're seeing the resurgence of that need to try and make some sense and create some organization around it. And there was a question put in the chat just around data governance. And I think it just probably really ties in perfectly here, because not only is it modeling out the data and like what data are we going to have and where is it going to be, but just the overall governance around that. And again, there was a dip in the demand for that, but we're seeing the resurgence in it, because if you don't have the controls and the oversight to the data, then we're going to end up back in the same situation we were in.
Okay, couldn't have said it better myself. So I'm glad to see that the demands of the industry are reflecting what we're kind of intuiting high level. I would like to come back to a point that Tom briefly touched on in the beginning, which is remote work and the pandemic, and maybe in his case Brexit. What effect is that having on the job market, the salary range and just availability of supply and labor?
Yeah, I can take that, especially when it comes to the pandemic and I guess reasonable expectations and demands that candidates can actually have post-COVID in particular. So I guess the working from home aspect can be quite controversial, as some people believe that everyone should be back in the office, and the other half seem to believe that everyone should be entitled to work fully from home. So there is those two distinct areas, and I would say kind of apply for roles that offer conditions that suit you and your lifestyle first and foremost. If a company's making you come into the office full time, it's probably worth questioning why that is. Sometimes there might be a good reason. I don't know if you're training others or supporting people that are in the office or users that are in the office. But realistically, these days, a fair compromise used to be hybrid. And we're seeing that most of our clients expect maybe 2 days, 3 days a week in the office, which is, I guess, considered fair. But there are a lot of fully remote roles still out there. So it really depends on the company. There's different working conditions for different organizations that benefit them, but we're seeing a hybrid nature pretty much across the board, to be honest. So yeah, around the working from home, that's my view. And then it's difficult when it comes to salaries. We haven't seen it impacted a huge amount in the UK, and Jennifer, you might have seen differently in the US, but we've seen that salaries have stayed fairly consistent to almost pre-COVID. There's been maybe a aligning between the London and the rest of the UK markets, because London organisations can find better talent, or they can find other talent, I should say, outside of London that would only need to come in once a week. So it's just more suitable for them. So salaries seem to remain pretty constant. We don't see fully remote roles paying a huge amount less. So that seems to be pretty consistent. But obviously, we've seen a big shift in the working from home aspect since COVID.
Okay. Is that what you're seeing as well, Jennifer, on your side?
Very, very similar. So I talked earlier about the supply and demand, and there's way more demand than there is supply. So people that are looking for work are able to really specify if they want to work remotely or want to work in a hybrid role. They're going to have those options available to them. In fact, I'm looking at a publication that we put out that showed that 81% of IT candidates place a higher medium level of importance on hybrid work. Our customers also are understanding that. So when you look at US-based salary trends, they've continued to go up from the pandemic even to today, beyond just keeping up with inflation. So, I mean, the demand is there for resources, and companies, when they're educated on, hey, look, this is the workforce, and these are the things that are important to them, and we've been kind of operating in this hybrid or fully remote, work environment for quite some time. Educating a customer that's hiring about what those demands are is going to ensure that they're getting the best possible resources, versus the person that is willing to go in a certain number of days a week at a certain salary.
You don't say. So between you, me, and nobody else, are you seeing a lot of openings for a product success lead, maybe Snowflake, Snowcore certified data superhero?
We should definitely talk after this. Like in an effort to not throw up a whole bunch of slides during this. I mean, there is some really exciting information that I think we should all feel empowered by, in that hybrid and remote work is not going away. While there was like a little bit of a downturn at the beginning of this year, it's ticking back up. So more work is continuing to be done, either fully remote or hybrid. And that matches really with the requirements that our customers have, and the demand for the overall right resources.
Okay. Let me ask about candidates. So turning a little bit to some of the soft skills and finding the right fit in the company or the culture that you might potentially be hiring for. So what are some soft skills that once you start talking to a candidate, even though they've passed the initial filters, that come up and disqualify them? So what do people fail on the most, even though they look promising on paper?
Oh yeah, I'll go on this one. So I think one of the key ones, one of the main ones, whether this is kind of accidentally or on purpose, is the end dates and the honesty around CVs. So we see a lot of disparities between CVs and LinkedIn. So I think basically having a gap here and there is absolutely fine if they're explainable, and taking a break counts as explanation. So just making sure that your CV, your resume, matches up to your LinkedIn exactly, and everything is cross-referenced. And just be honest, basically, if there's any short-term roles that you feel you should leave off the resume in case someone doesn't pick them up, or you don't want someone to pick them up, then best to leave it on there and just give an explanation when you speak to a recruiter or to the manager. It's very rarely counted against you if it's there, but what can be counted against you is if there's misalignment between the two. So that's one red flag that we do pick up on, and that's probably the key one for us. Actually, one more just quickly is around technical assessments. Obviously, within the data space, within the IT world, a lot of technical assessments are carried out, and we would never advise any of our clients to send technical assessments out before the interview process started. I don't think personally that's fair. But if the if the client has taken the time to interview in the first place, then they're likely to send out a technical test, and you should try and show willing where possible to conduct the technical test. It's worth bearing in mind that it's a good opportunity for you to find out a bit more about how the company assess the technical skills you have, and make sure that there's an alignment in the ways that you work. So it's a good tool for both parties. And yeah, just a thought.
Okay. And the other way around, as a candidate, are there any red flags that you might see that right away, kind of aside from being unqualified, that a company is not a good fit for you, or just the role itself or the culture is likely not to align with your own preferences?
I think when you're working with a recruiter, they should be able to tell you not just the job description, but about the company, about the team and the culture of the team, and what makes that team successful, and the company, and what the company's overall goals and objectives. And you definitely want to make sure you know that ahead of time, so that you're in the best position to succeed for yourself and to be happy with what you're doing. So do those things align with you? In your own personal goals. Like if you don't like working with anybody else, and you like to be like in a, very quiet workspace, to find out that it's an open cubicle type setting and there are going to be a lot of people around, like that might not be the best environment for you to thrive. So you're not just wanting to understand the technical aspects of the role and what you're going to be working on, but like, tell me about the team. Like, how long have they been together? What makes this team work really well? Why is this position open? Maybe the last person didn't work out for a particular reason. Just understanding all of the other aspects around that.
Okay.
And then if it's full-time work, certainly just understanding the company's overall total compensation, not just salary, but benefits and all of the other things that kind of fall into that, the benefits, the bonus, like all of those other things that go into the work-life balance and making sure that you've made the right selection.
Okay. And what might be some red flags that a candidate might unintentionally be giving away, besides any obvious errors or gaps on their CV, but certain behaviors or a certain way of carrying themselves, anything that you would kind of advise to kind of check ahead of an interview?
Oh, well, during an interview, now that we do most of them like online like this, I know there's a desire to make sure, like some people will call in on their phone, so they have their audio in their headset, and then they'll do like the video through their computer. Sometimes that can cause a delay in speech, which could make it seem like someone is feeding you answers or talking for you. So I would highly recommend that you do the speech, the audio, the video through one system, so there isn't that fear. The other thing is when their eyes are darting back and forth and looking around, you need to be super focused. so that it doesn't look like you're, typing up the question and then reading the answer. Like I'm looking at my other monitor here, like reading the answer and then trying to give it back to them, or looking and talking to another person. Because if they can't see all of what's going around, they can only make assumptions, and you don't want them making assumptions.
Yeah, we get that quite a lot. I'd say we do get feedback that someone's really good, someone's really nice, and they felt like a good cultural fit for the team, and they gave some good answers, but it was quite clear that, or obvious, that they were typing as well. So it might even have been a small section, and they probably would have got the job if they had been honest and said, I'm not sure of that answer, but I'll get back to you. I'm not sure about that one. I apologize. Then just either looking for it quickly, or even if they're not typing away, guessing and getting it wrong, sometimes it is better to be honest about something you don't know. And interviews are there to be a good conversation between 2 or 3 or more people. So this kind of back and forth is normal. And if there is something you don't know, don't try and guess it. Just be honest, I would say.
Okay. Let me just share my screen, because there was a very, very timely comic that I saw in the New Yorker this week. You can see that. Tell me about a time a job interviewer tried to throw you a curveball and how you handled it. A little bit of metadata for this call. But on that note, I wanted to play a little exercise of like a case study of three different roles and 3 different profiles, and how you would advise them based on their situation of they want to progress, which I'll describe. So the first one, Beatrice, who is a business analyst. So she's mastered Excel, and now she wants to transition to the data team. So she's already done kind of analysis, and she wants to get more formal. So the first question is, would you advise someone like that to upskill and move internally, or get some kind of certification and look for an outside role that she can transition to? Or just in general, how would you treat this person? What would you advise her to do?
Well, without knowing Beatrix, the first thing I would say is, if you've been working heavily with Excel as a data analyst, you're probably very skilled at pivot tables and reports and all of those things. An easy thing to do is to get a certificate to show competency in utilizing Excel, and maybe even add some of the examples of the work that you've done, including that with your resume if you're sending it off. But I think a natural progression for that person, if you've just heavily been involved in Excel and analyzing information in Excel and using the pivot tables and charts to help kind of visualize that, is moving on to like a data visualization team, or depending on how much manipulation of the data they were doing, going down maybe a master data management or data governance type path. Depending on the level of experience and the depth of knowledge of the data and some of the issues, that might be a better path. But naturally, I'd see moving from Excel analytics to some other type of advanced visualization would be probably the next major step. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, to be honest. I think that with regards to visualization, there's other tools out there such as Tableau and Power BI that can be not necessarily easy to master, but definitely easy to straightforward enough to pick up basic skills to see if you enjoy using the tools, but just adding other strings to your bow when it comes to analytics and visualization. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but following kind of your passions and the tools that you like using. But Excel is a very, very good place to start. And if you've got advanced skills with Excel, then that will lend itself to other analytics and visualization tools for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 things that are not going away in the data world: SQL and Excel.
Yeah.
And cockroaches, or I don't know. All right, next question. Stu, who's a student, just finished uni with a computer science degree, so he's fully proficient in Python and SQL, but he doesn't have any hands-on experience with the hot cloud data platforms. But he wants to work for a high-profile company with either utilizing these technologies or the vendor themselves. What would you recommend to Stu?
In the UK, there's a lot of a lot of boot camps that students can join. For example, I know that some of them are free 12-week boot camps, which graduates can join as having taken a computer science or even data engineering degree, and then that gives you 12 weeks intensive training to become or apply for professional data engineer or junior data engineer roles. So there is a bit of a path, but 12 weeks is not a long time in the grand scheme of things, but also it is enough time to really get to grips with some cloud technologies and other technologies you might not have got experience with during your degree. So we see these boot camps and internships on CVs. We do place permanent data engineer graduates that have come from this boot camps. It's probably the first thing that we look out for when we're looking for a junior data engineer, is those short periods within organizations that really teach them the nuts and bolts. So that's one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the boot camps as well. Everything that Tom said would completely apply to here in North America.
Okay. All right. And last one is Corey, who is a coder, kind of veteran, but he's stuck in on-premise architecture, SQL Server, Postgres, just on-premise, Airflow, and he wants to stay relevant, wants to stay current, and also he's a bit senior. He can't really say, take a boot camp, or maybe he can. I don't know. What would you advise Corey to do if he wants to stay relevant in the data space?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a tricky one, isn't it?
Well, I'll just assume it's a real person. There are some data connectors that I would suggest you become familiar with between Postgres and like Snowflake. So let's say you're in that same situation, whether it's you're really strong with SQL, Postgres, whatever it might be. Pick one of those top cloud providers and just Google like your skill and Snowflake as an example, and see what comes up. And you're gonna find that there is a connection, and it's usually not a huge learning curve. It's just another step in your own evolution. It's not going to require you going to a boot camp, reskilling yourself. You already have the IT background. As far as, in my opinion, once your brain is used to solving those types of problems, like the problems that we solve day in and day out, adding another technology to the mix, that's just learning the intricacies of that particular technology. But the patterns and the things that we do are typically the same. So in that situation, I would say, hey, investigate what else is out there that can leverage what you currently know and what's currently hot. So Snowflake, GCP, AWS, Azure, whatever it might be. And there are always a ton of online trainings, free trainings, things that you can sign up for, even webinars put on like this. In companies like Attack Systems putting on like a webinar where you can get on and learn about GCP in the retail space and watch how you can leverage your existing skills towards a data engineering path.
Okay. Let's I don't have any more use cases, so let's turn to some of the themes that I've seen popping up on the Q&A and some of the pending questions. So one, you might have answered this already, but just wanted to voice it out loud. We mentioned certification. So obviously it helps a lot if you're interviewing for a Snowflake job and you've got a Snowflake certification. But are there certifications, general purpose or specific skills? I know we have a couple of Data Vault certified practitioners on this call. Things that really help you stand out if you have a certification that are kind of translatable to multiple tech stacks and technologies.
I think it depends which level you're coming in at. I guess my background has predominantly been in the contract market. It's changed more recently to permanent as well as contract. And on the contract side, certifications aren't quite as critical as they would be for perhaps a junior data engineer or maybe a mid-level data engineer trying to get to the next level. But yeah, there are lots of certifications out there. I think when it comes to Snowflake, we're seeing a lot of people become Snowflake or certified, which seems to be something which has been on job specs more often than other potential technologies. So it does depend on the seniority as well as the technology as to whether an accreditation or certification means a whole lot. I think that sometimes the courses can be quite easy. Sometimes with Snowflake, for example, I know it's quite difficult. So therefore it goes a longer way. But it does depend. It's not the most straightforward answer, but I think it does depend on the seniority of the person and also whether the accreditation is worth its salt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always, I think, Matt, it's always a balance between your skill and experience and the certification. Like, you wouldn't hire a doctor to do open heart surgery if all they had done is passed a bunch of tests and read some books. You would want them to have done that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So it's really, there has to be a balance, like Tom was saying, and it's gonna vary based on the positions. And sometimes not just a certification, accreditations are offered. I know Snowflake offers them, GCP offers them as well. But looking for those, which requires you to invest about 4 hours of your time, but you're tested and they award you a badge, which you can post on LinkedIn, which definitely shows that you have mastered some level of that skill.
Okay. Question from our friend Keith around the automated solutions that are used to scan resumes by HR organizations and the impact on good candidates being found. So I don't know if Keith is referring to someone being potentially glossed over because they haven't included the right keywords, or just how do you see these screeners in general, or what someone can do to maximize their chances of passing the first round?
I think there's two things. One, if you're submitting your resume on yourself and not working with a recruiter like Tom or someone on my team, if you're just submitting your resume yourself, you're going to want to make sure that you have thought through the thousands of different ways that they could be screening based on what those the terminology is. And it's usually going to be something that was back on the job description. That's if you're kind of on your own and you're trying to navigate that whole job search. Now, if you're working with Tom or myself, we're going to have a relationship with the customer. We're going to be able to tell you what we know that they're looking for. And we are also going to be speaking on your behalf to help articulate your skills, your experience when you've done it, and then who we've talked to, like your previous hiring manager that is talking about like how successful you were in that role. So there's two different ways. I mean, if you're on your own and submitting it blindly into a system, you have to make sure that you have it phrased every possible way so that it's going to get picked up. Hopefully that answers your question, Keith.
There's a question from Sheikh about the CDMP and does that have any value? So that's Certified Data Management Professionals. I'm not familiar with that one, so.
I think I'm not overly familiar with it either, but I think with a lot of these accreditations, there's definitely no harm in it at all. And if we can see that you've taken accreditations, it shows a real kind of the way that you approach it is that you want to upskill, you want to be better, you want to have that example of what you've done in the past. So the companies we work with won't necessarily say we have to have someone who has a CDMP, but it definitely will go a long way to standing out along with other accreditations. So I'd say that as many accreditations as you can take is always going to be beneficial. But that one in particular isn't one that I've seen as an essential accreditation very often.
But really good point, Tom. It shows that you've invested in yourself and you're investing in the future of your role in the data space, which I think a customer would appreciate.
So we're almost on time, so I wanted to save the best for last, which is just kind of a lightning round of, I'm going to mention a term, something that's thrown around a lot on the internet, on LinkedIn, and I'd like you guys to just tell me yes or no, is this something that comes up in actual job descriptions? Are people actively looking for this, or is just talked about as hype? So let's start with data modeling. I think we already covered this one, but data modeling, that's a big yes from both.
Definitely, yeah.
Data mesh?
Not
don't see it as frequently.
No.
Okay. Data vault?
Yeah. Personally, I've seen a lot of data vault more recently over the last 3 to 6 months. So yes.
And are those looking for experience or certification explicitly?
Experience. So no, we've not seen a requirement for a certification. It's been Data Vault 2.0 methodology experience in practice. So it has to be something they've used commercially.
Okay.
Same thing.
Data contracts?
Not seeing a need for certifications on it, but certainly it does come up. And I think it's just the overall, as companies are moving to these cloud data warehouses and looking at building them, they're looking for people that have had a depth of experience.
Okay, it's something that our friend Chad Sanderson has helped popularize. So I just wanted to see how prevalent they've become. They certainly sound like a good idea. The semantic layer, so something DBT is currently heavily investing on.
I'm not seeing it come up in a. Go ahead. Sorry, Tom.
Oh no, I was going to say similar. I've not seen semantic layer come up on a job spec. I've seen DBT certainly come up as on various job specs. That is, DBT seems to be increasing as a need, but I can't say that we've had a requirement for someone who's got experience working with a semantic layer, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's not a job description type of thing.
Okay. Experience with NoSQL databases, and that is a wide swath of different technologies, but NoSQL.
All the time.
Okay. DBT we just covered. That's a big yes from both of you, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And FinOps.
Oh, this is such a hot topic. I actually have an article posted as a feature on my LinkedIn page. Yeah, FinOps, we're hearing it all the time. We're having conversations with our customers because it's about, okay, you're moving to the cloud or you're in the cloud. How do you create greater visibility, transparency, and optimize your spending, which is something that everyone would be interested in because it's going to help them, have better visibility and save money, which I think everyone wants at this point.
Yeah, amazing. Last one, data ops.
Oh, I saw that question come through. I think I'm seeing it more, but I think the thing when I look at that and I think about what did we used to probably call it, I mean, it's definitely hot. It's your ability to kind of migrate through and work through the iterative process of working with data and solving business problems in projects. So yes, I think you're going to, like ML ops, right? We hear about it a lot. Companies and companies that are hiring are looking for people that really kind of have that holistic view, that have been through a whole life cycle, that just don't do like one small thing. And that's what's really important.
Okay, amazing. We're already a little bit over time, so let's end it here. But I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you, Tom and Jennifer. Wealth of insight and information. I learned a lot. I'm sure that our guests have also walked away with a tremendous wealth of knowledge there as well. So thank you very much. And last but not least, I've already seen some of these messages that people are keen to get in touch with you if they have follow-up questions, if they're looking to move. So how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great place. So yeah, anyone can feel free to connect with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anyone's got any further questions around how to make themselves stand out or work for the CV, then always happy to help. But LinkedIn's the best one for me.
Yep. And I dropped in my email address and then my full name on LinkedIn because my sister-in-law has the same name and she's also from the same town. So either one.
Okay. In that case, thank you so much. Thanks again.
Thank you guys as well.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. See you later.